Ava's second birthday. That afternoon, I stood in the kitchen, one hand holding the metal mixing bowl, the other spreading white buttercream over a tiny round cake. The first cake I'd made from scratch in months, after always just ordering one for convenience. The oven was still warm, flour speckled the countertop, and the number 2 candle waited quietly on a plate nearby, ready to be placed on top once Ethan got home. We'd hit play on Happy Birthday, snap a few perfect photos, and post them like any normal family. But instead of Ava's little feet running through the living room, yelling, "Mama, cake!" all I heard were dry, persistent coughs, mixed with thin, wheezy breathing coming from the bedroom. That sound made me drop the spatula straight into the sink. I wiped my hands on my apron, rushed down the hallway, and opened her door. The moon-shaped nightlight cast a soft yellow glow over the white crib. Ava lay curled up on the cloud-patterned sheet, cheeks flushed, hair sticking to her forehead, eyes barely open, each breath short, fast, and strained. I placed my palm on her forehead and instantly felt a burning heat, the kind of heat that doesn't need a thermometer to confirm it's way past safe. My hand shook as I pressed the thermometer's button, slid it under her arm, and waited for the beeps. 100, 102, 103.8 degrees Fahrenheit. I pulled it out, inhaled sharply, tried again, as if waiting longer might somehow change the number. It climbed near 104 degrees Fahrenheit and stayed there, blinking on the screen like it was mocking me. For a few seconds, I could hear my own heartbeat louder than the AC hum. My first instinct was to call my husband, her father. Ava opened her eyes, barely whispering, "Mom, hurts." I picked her up, pressing her against my chest to calm her coughing, reached for my phone on the shelf, and dialed Ethan's number by reflex. The same digits I'd punched in thousands of times for things like, "Are you working late?" or "Are you almost home?" But instead of his voice, I was hit by a wall of sound. Loud music, people laughing, the clink of glasses. It took a second call for him to answer. "Hello?" His voice was louder, the kind he used for investor meetings, not with his wife. "Ethan, Ava's running a really high fever, almost 104, and she's wheezing. I think I have to take her to the hospital," I said quickly, with Ava's little coughs right by my ear. He was silent for a few beats, not because he was shocked, but because he was straining to hear over the music. "Claire, I'm in the middle of the Miami project launch. You know this." He sighed, annoyed, like I'd just ruined a big pitch. "Kids get fevers all the time. Give her Tylenol, sponge her down with warm water, let her sleep. Don't make a big deal, okay? It's simple. You're really calling me for this?" I opened my mouth to say she's struggling to breathe, but a woman's voice came through on his end. I couldn't catch the words. Then a rushed, "I'll call you back," and the screen went black. I stood still by the crib, Ava burning up in my arms, the kitchen still carrying the scent of vanilla and butter, the candle untouched on the plate, and the house, the one we had picked out together, brick by brick, suddenly felt vast and meaningless. And in my ears, alongside my daughter's labored breathing, all I could hear were his words. "You're really calling me for this?" Dry and final, like a sentence handed down. In that moment, the feeling of being abandoned wasn't a wave. It was a pull, straight from the pit of my stomach to my throat. I called my mother-in-law, just hoping to hear, "Do you think it's serious enough for the ER?" But silence no one picked up. It was just me, and a baby fighting to breathe. I threw on the jacket hanging by the bed, wrapped Ava in a thin blanket, heard her whisper, "Mama!" faintly, and nearly sprinted down the stairs. Every step felt longer than usual. I placed her in the car seat, keeping one hand behind her neck until I was sure she was resting safely, then ran around to the driver's side. The hospital wasn't far, but every red light, every slow car ahead made me want to scream. One hand gripped the steering wheel, the other reached back now and then to touch her leg, to make sure she was still warm, still there, still breathing. As I pushed open the ER doors, the smell of disinfectant, the harsh, white lights, the metallic squeak of wheels on the floor all mixed with the pounding in my chest. The nurse only needed a few seconds looking at Ava and the thermometer I held out before calling for the doctor. They laid her on a tiny bed, clipped a pulse oximeter to her finger, oxygen tubing, machines beeping steadily while I stood beside her, gripping the edge of my coat so tight my nails dug into my skin. The doctor looked at the screen, then at Ava, then at me, and his eyes didn't have that usual calm medical mask. "Severe viral pneumonia," he said slowly. "Her oxygen is low. A few more hours without treatment, and she might not have made it." Those last 3 words pierced straight through me, but strangely, they didn't crush me. I thought I'd cry, collapse, scream, but instead, everything inside just quieted, like someone had turned down the volume in my head. I stared at Ava's tiny hands, restrained by medical tape, her chest rising and falling under that pale green gown, and realized the blinding fear, the panic, was melting into something else, a slow, cold anger paired with a terrifying clarity. As the nurse adjusted the oxygen line, I backed away slightly, sat in the plastic chair by the bed, pulled out my phone, not to call someone for comfort, but just to see if he would call back. The screen lit up. No missed calls. No text asking, "How's she doing?" Instead, an iMessage notification from an unknown number with a photo icon. My heart skipped a beat as my finger swiped. The photo was clear. Ethan, in the gray suit I had helped him choose, champagne glass in hand, his head tilted toward a brunette in a tight red dress, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling at the camera beneath golden event lights. Behind them, the backdrop of the very launch event he'd said was too important to miss. No caption needed, no explanation. The setting said it all. While his daughter lay under oxygen tubes, he was clinking glasses, wrapping his arm around another woman, fully immersed in a life that no longer included us. I sat there, in the sterile blue light of the ER, hearing the rhythmic beeps of machines, staring at that photo on the screen. And for the first time, I placed two truths side by side. I had believed this was just one careless night, a slip-up from a busy husband. But no. This was a choice, a pattern, a framework in which my daughter and I were merely props for the image of a successful man with a family. I locked the screen, looked up at Ava, her cheeks still flushed, lips dry, but breathing a bit steadier, and with absolute clarity, no drama. A sentence appeared in my mind like it had been carved on a wall. This time, I won't let his indifference go unanswered. On the hard plastic chair beside the hospital bed, as the respiratory monitor beeped steadily like a cold warning signal, memories started flooding back like someone had pressed play on an old tape, fast-forwarding through scenes of a life I had long neglected before I became Mrs. Reynolds. I was Claire Thompson, a name that once appeared on the countertops of clean energy projects, on dust-covered hard hats at construction sites, on design blueprints stacked so high you couldn't see the desk beneath them. I graduated from MIT, started my own environmental consulting firm at 27. I still remember the night I signed my first contract with the city of Boston. I drove around all night just to soak in the feeling of, I did it. My first project, a wind flow modeling system in Wyoming, was the technical backbone that helped Harrington Renewables raise their seed funding. Ethan would often tell that story to investors as if it were our joint success, and I believed him. I smiled. I didn't ask for credit. I willingly merged my company into his startup, bringing over clients, industry friends, the network I'd built from countless late nights and too much coffee. I didn't just bring expertise. I brought my reputation to back the dream I thought was ours. Over time, though, it was Ethan himself, with words that sounded tender, but were really invisible hands pushing me out of my own life, who chipped away at me. "You deserve to rest, Claire. Why push yourself so hard? You should focus on family. I've got the technical side covered. Just let me shine." At first I resisted, but every time a meeting had to be rescheduled because I was late from picking up Ava at daycare, every time Ethan frowned at my dusty field shirt at a dinner with partners, I gave in a little more. Eventually, my yellow hard hat sat untouched on a shelf, and I couldn't even remember the last time I wore it. My laptop filled with simulation files had been replaced by grocery lists and Costco orders I once managed multi-million-dollar energy projects. And now, standing in the very home I helped pay for, I had become a kind of deluxe housekeeper. Someone who made sure everything ran smoothly, with no emotion, no needs. I had turned myself into a silent shadow behind the man the world applauded as a visionary leader. All of that spun in my head as I looked down at the small child lying beneath wires and monitors, in the white light and sterile sounds of the ICU. Ava slept fitfully, lips dry and slightly parted, each breath feeling like it got stuck somewhere in her lungs. I placed my hand on her chest, feeling the tiny rise and fall, faster than normal, then gently stroked her arm, grounding myself in the simple fact that she's still here. And in that moment, for the first time, I saw clearly the prison I had walked into with both feet, the door held open by me, only to be shut by someone else. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call my best friend. I knew they'd say things like, "It'll be okay," "Hang in there," and none of that would help right now. I didn't need comfort. I needed truth. I needed an ally who could understand the numbers Ethan had tried to bury. I opened my contacts app, the list unfolding like a reel from another lifetime. Old clients, MIT classmates, colleagues from field sites, a few names I once considered family. My finger scrolled past them all, almost out of habit, until it stopped on one familiar name that had been forgotten too long. Noah Carter, former CFO of Harrington Renewables. The only man who once looked at the spreadsheet and had the guts to say, "Ethan, these numbers don't add up." And the one Ethan fired without warning. No thank you email, no explanation, just for speaking up. I remember Noah's eyes the day he left, like they were saying, "Claire, this will come back to haunt you." But I didn't listen. I chose to trust my husband. I placed my faith in the wrong place. I hit call. The phone rang long enough that I thought he wouldn't pick up. Then a voice. "Hello?" Tired, low, slightly hoarse. The voice of someone who'd fought too many battles no one knew about. "Noah, it's me, Claire." A small pause. Then he exhaled. "If you're calling, it means it's serious." I looked over at Ava, at the oxygen levels blinking on the monitor. I said it simply, clearly, as crisp as a pen stroke on a blueprint. "It's not just Ethan, it's the company. And it's my daughter. I need to see you, tomorrow morning." On the other end, no unnecessary questions, no curiosity, just a quiet nod in his voice. "Okay, tomorrow morning." My old office in West Village felt like a time capsule wrapped in a thin layer of dust. Every time I opened the door, it was like touching a different version of myself, the version who never gave up on her dream. Light streamed through the small window and landed on the old rolls of technical drawings bound in fraying rope. The wind turbine models, the clean biomass energy prototypes lay dormant under white sheets, like figures in a museum. Remnants of a career interrupted midstream. I'd kept up the rent using a personal investment fund I set aside before I got married. A fund Ethan never asked about, never cared to notice. To him, this place was just Claire's hobby room, a harmless little corner, so he forgot about it. I didn't. At exactly 8 a.m., there was a knock. Noah Carter appeared in the doorway, older than I remembered. His suit was still sharp, like always, but his eyes carried a weight like he was shouldering the world a man built to live inside spreadsheets. And what I was about to tell him was pure chaos. "Coffee?" I asked, nodding toward the faded silver mocha pot on the shelf. "Thanks," he said, his eyes scanning the room, as if swallowing every trace of a once brilliant engineer's mind forced into hibernation. "Last time I was here," Noah said, accepting the cup, "you were designing a water recapture system for those Aspen condos we even won an award." "A lot has changed," I said. "Ethan's in Napa, wrapping his arm around some mistress at Galas, while our daughter nearly died last night from pneumonia. And he told me not to make a big deal about it." Noah's jaw tightened. He didn't ask more. Didn't need to. He had seen the things I tried not to see: bloated expense reports, payments to so-called consulting agencies that were really models, overpriced jewelry labeled as corporate gifts he'd warned me. I hadn't listened. "I'm sorry, Claire." "I don't need sorry," I said, slipping into the professional tone I used to carry in project briefings. "I need a partner." I let the words drop like a stone in the quiet room. "You know better than anyone," I continued. "Harrington Renewables was built on my technical foundation and your financial strategy. We should have been partners. Instead, we were both sidelined to support roles for a man who always believed he was the center of the universe." Noah looked down into his coffee cup like it might hold an answer. "The weak structure you mentioned. What is it?" he asked, getting right to the point. I walked over to the wall-mounted steel cabinet, dialed the familiar code, and unlocked it. The drawer clicked open, and I pulled out an old leather folder, its edges worn. I placed it on the dust-covered drafting table. "The Boulder Solar Plant," I said. "The project that put Harrington Renewables on the map. Remember the final missing $5 million? No bank would guarantee it." "I remember," Noah said. "Ethan claimed a private investor came in at the last minute. Never disclosed who? In the books, that amount was like a ghost I was ordered to shield." "There was no private investor." I opened the folder and slid the top document across to him. It was me. Noah held his breath. On the page was a loan agreement. Harrington Renewables as borrower. The lender listed as my family's investment trust collateral. Willow Creek Ranch in Montana, part of my father's inheritance. I even asked my dad's lawyer to include a special clause. I said, flipping to the next section. "If the CEO commits financial fraud, displays weak governance, or engages in conduct that damages brand integrity, I have the right to foreclose immediately. And if payment isn't made within 48 hours, Noah read, his eyes widening. "Controlling shares transferred to you." Exactly. Noah exhaled, the kind of sigh that sounded like he was releasing an entire decade of betrayal. "The affair," he said, "neglecting your daughter. That checks the moral clause." "That's a shield," I said. "But to stand firm in front of the board? Not enough they'll chalk it up to family matters. We need something undeniable, like financial fraud." I looked him straight in the eye. Noah turned, walked to the window, stared down at the noisy street below. He stood there for a long time, as if weighing a lifetime of misplaced loyalty. "I have it. The inflated invoices, Sunrise Builders Records shell accounts, the condo he bought for her, the server logs I backed up." When he turned back, his voice was low but precise. "I have the originals, and the doctored versions." His eyes met mine, no longer tired, but razor sharp. "This is dangerous," he said. "If we fail, he'll destroy us." I stood tall, my voice soft but hard as steel. "He already destroyed what mattered most. I'm not afraid anymore. Are you?" Noah looked at the stack of documents, then back at me. He didn't see a betrayed wife anymore. He saw a leader. "Ethan's in Napa until tomorrow night," he said, "with her. Their return flight to JFK is at 8 p.m., which means—" "We have less than 36 hours," I said, finishing his sentence, "to bring down the king inside his own castle." Noah gave a small nod. "Then let's begin." And in that dust-covered room, an alliance was forged. An alliance built on betrayal, truth, and the determination to reclaim an empire that should have been ours from the start. My father's longtime attorney, Margaret Vargas, the woman who had quietly laid every legal brick beneath my life without me ever realizing it, worked in an office on the 10th floor of an old building where the afternoon light always fell across the ebony desk in a warm golden stripe, like the last sunlight of the day. She sat behind that desk, her silver hair pinned neatly, thin glasses resting on the bridge of her nose, her face marked by the lines of someone who had witnessed too many battles without ever being the one on the front line. I placed the Boulder file on her desk. She didn't open it immediately, but tapped the cover lightly with the end of her pen, just enough for dust to rise in a faint shimmer. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking in the low, steady voice I remembered from childhood, every time my father brought me to her office. Your father once told me, build my daughter a fortress in the contracts. Now it's time to use it. I sat down, feeling the entire room contract around that desk. Margaret opened the file, turning each page as if peeling back the old skin of a creature awakened from hibernation. She pointed to the moral conduct clause and tapped it. This is the shield, she said. It lets you stand tall when you tell the story of how you and your daughter were abandoned, but a shield doesn't win a war. Then she flipped to the next section, clauses on mismanagement, fraud, weak governance. And this, she said, her tone even but her eyes sharp as a blade, is the artillery, the part the law respects, the part the board cannot ignore. She marked lines with her pen while explaining the strategy as if reading a military map. Noah will compile all the evidence into an encrypted file. You will not touch that file. For your own protection. I will prepare the foreclosure notice and the transfer of shares package for the stock exchange and the custodial bank, based on Article 27, Section 3 of the corporate charter. I blinked. Ethan wrote that charter in the first year, when he liked to pretend he was vision-driven. Margaret, I said, what is Section 3? She slid the document toward me and pointed at a single line. Allows emergency transfer of operational authority when the CEO becomes a legal risk threatening the company's survival. She didn't smile, but the corner of her mouth lifted almost imperceptibly. He wrote it himself, she said, and that's what will remove him. I sat silent. The papers in front of me were not just law. They were a doorway, a key, and a punishment I never thought I would hold in my hands. Margaret closed the file and placed both hands on top of it like a ritual. Claire, she said slowly, we are not stealing this company. We are saving it from its most corrupt leader. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. My spine aligning, vertebra by vertebra. Tuesday began under the cold white light of Mount Sinai's hospital room. Ava's fever had broken, her breathing eased, her chest no longer rising in panicked jolts. I sat on the hospital bed, back against the wall, left arm around her, right hand holding my phone, thumb typing out encrypted messages to Noah and Margaret. File complete. Email list finalized. Article 27, confirmed. With each text, my heartbeat synced with the steady beep of the oxygen monitor of my world. Once sprawling across job sites, meeting rooms, and project plans, had shrunk into just two things: the child in my arms and the legal war I was launching with trembling fingers. In the present moment, all I could see was the glowing message screen in a quiet room, messages from an old ally. And while I sat in that hospital with my daughter, I learned that Ethan was out playing golf under Napa's golden sun, drinking champagne with his mistress on a resort rooftop, telling his friends that my call the night before was just another dramatic episode from the wife stuck at home. He had no idea the sky behind him was cracking open. That evening, as twilight washed the hospital buildings in purple, Ava slept peacefully against me, her tiny hand gripping my collar, like she was grounding herself. I held my phone in my free hand as Noah's first call came in. In Brooklyn, Noah sat in his small home office, the blue glow of his laptop illuminating his face. He opened a folder labeled Project Sunflower, the final file containing every piece of fraud, organized, encrypted, time-stamped. He placed the cursor over Send. I texted Margaret, file received. It was 7 p.m., and she was still in her office when the message arrived. Immediately, she filed the foreclosure notice through the online legal system, then sent the share transfer directive to the custodial bank. 1 minute, 60 seconds. In exactly 1 minute, I changed Ethan's entire life. And the strangest part was, he had no idea. And I knew, from that moment on, the world no longer revolved around him. It revolved around me. And around the future I would reclaim for my daughter. When I carried Ava through the front door, the house was as quiet as always, the kind of silence that used to suffocate me. But that night, the silence felt different. It wasn't a prison anymore. It felt like a command center before the final strike. I closed the door with my elbow because Ava was asleep on my shoulder, her breath steady, soft like a breeze skimming over grass. I walked to her room first, switched on the bunny-shaped nightlight, laid her down gently, smoothed her fine hair, and listened to the steady sound from her chest, the sound I had feared would vanish forever on her birthday afternoon. I stood up, took a deep breath, and turned without hesitation. Walked straight into Ethan's office. The room was exactly the same. Leadership textbooks lined up by color. Photos of him shaking hands with investors. The brown leather chair he loved to sit in to look authoritative. But this time, I didn't look at it like a wife entering her husband's territory. I saw it as an inspector entering a scene. I sat in his chair, adjusted the backrest, felt the leather worn smooth from years of his weight. I opened his laptop. His password had always been his name, spelled backward. Nothing had changed. The screen lit up, and his email opened instantly. At that same moment, in homes across New York and Connecticut, the phones of board members began to buzz nonstop. Subject lines: Evidence of breach of fiduciary duty by CEO Ethan Reynolds. Subject lines like bullets cracking the pristine glass fortress Ethan had tried to build for years. I sat still for a few seconds, not because I was surprised, but because it felt like a complex design had just clicked perfectly into place. I smiled. A very small, very still smile. The smile of an engineer who had poured effort into a delicate structure and was now watching it perform exactly as intended. No fireworks, no applause, just a quiet light inside my chest, the light of precision. The next morning, at the Mistress's apartment in the Upper East Side, I wasn't there, but I knew exactly what was happening on the other side of the city. Down to the detail, Ethan woke up late. The first thing he saw wasn't the image of his daughter nearly losing oxygen the night before. It was the red dress on the floor next to the bed, a scene he probably considered a well-earned reward. After the party, he reached for his phone, that lazy motion I had seen too many times. He opened his email. Access denied. He tried again. Access denied. He opened his banking app. Your account has been temporarily restricted. Please contact your institutional administrator. He would jump up immediately, voice sharp like the whole world had messed up. What the hell? Where's my account? And someone would tell him what was happening. Ethan, did you see the news yet? What news? Why's my email locked? There's been an emergency board meeting since 6 a.m. The servers are being seized. Attorney Vargas showed up with a security team. And Claire. It looks like Claire is involved. The heartbeat of a man realizing for the first time that his power has limits. And he, the man who believed he was the center of every system, still thought that when he walked into the company, people would fear him, prioritize him, listen to him. He didn't know the old order had died last night. And the one who buried it was me. Right in the marble lobby of Harrington Renewables, Ethan walked in, shirt wrinkled, tie crooked, face still tired from a night at the mistress's apartment, swiped his badge at the turnstile, and was met instantly by a dry beep and a flashing red light. Access denied. He tried again, twice. Each time the machine responded with the same mechanical indifference, as if rejecting the very pride he carried. He snapped at Tom, the gray-haired security guard who had greeted him every day for 8 years. Tom, let me in. I'm the CEO. But Tom stood tall, gaze steady. I'm sorry, Mr. Reynolds. I've been instructed not to let you in. And just as his anger was about to break loose, Margaret Vargas stepped out of the elevator, her long coat catching the light like a blade, 2 security personnel flanking her. She didn't pause for breath. She pulled a blue folder from her coat and pressed it into his hand. Mr. Reynolds, this is your official notice of termination as CEO and chairman of the board, effective immediately. Then the documents dropped one by one to the marble floor, like heavy rivets. A signed copy of the Boulder contract, Noah's financial fraud summary, the board's approval for full transfer of operational control. To me, Ethan, now panicking, dialed board members one by one, fingertips shaking, only to hear voicemail. For the first time in his career, other people's silence became a fatal answer. That afternoon, he sped to the Hamptons, slammed the front door so hard the frame trembled, screaming my name as if someone had to answer for his collapse. "Claire, Claire!" He finally found me in his office. Or rather, my office. I was seated behind the wooden desk he once saw as his throne, wearing a navy dress, calm, as if I had always belonged there. The room bore no trace of him. No trophies, no self-glorifying awards, no photos with investors hanging to remind himself of how important he was. The air felt cleaner, sharper, stronger. In front of me were only two things: a steaming cup of tea and the divorce papers. When he barged in, I didn't flinch, didn't look up right away. I simply took a slow sip from my cup. The soft clink of porcelain was the only sound. His voice was hoarse with collapse. "What did you do?" I looked up. My eyes held no hatred, no tears, no revenge. What he saw was worse: indifference, the cold appraisal of an operator evaluating an asset that had lost all value. "I protected our daughter's future, something you didn't do," I said, my voice as flat as a winter lake. He slammed the desk, yelling, "This is my company, my life! You tricked me! You broke the law!" I placed my hand on the stack to the left, tilting my head slightly. "Broke the law? Your signatures on every page. And your daughter's breath, your honor, your future. You signed those away yourself, Ethan. That night when our child couldn't breathe, you told me not to make a big deal. So, this is just a company." I slid the divorce papers toward him. "Sign, this is the most generous offer you'll ever receive. You'll get money to start over. You'll have visitation rights with Ava. Supervised. In exchange, you stay silent." As he choked on his next word, I tapped the blue folder containing the evidence Noah had compiled. "If you decide to fight me, this folder goes straight to the federal prosecutor's desk. And you know they don't negotiate." From that moment, he truly began to unravel. He cycled through tactics like a drowning man grabbing for every straw. When threats failed, he tried to belittle me. "You're just an engineer, not a CEO. You don't understand this market. You don't understand investors, or Everglades, or—" I leaned back, letting the faint creak of leather interrupt his delusion. "I understand every bolt, every leverage ratio, every environmental impact report you buried. I know Everglades is 30% over budget. I know the funds are pulling out. I know you're lying to your mistress. I understand everything." He shifted to pleading. "Okay, you're angry. I get it. But don't push me out of the company I helped build. Let me stay on as an advisor, or silent partner, for the good of the company." I answered instantly, offering no window for hope. "The company needs a purge from the toxicity and fraud you've embedded. Your presence is a legal liability. What's on this table is all you have left." Then he reached for what he thought would break me. "What about Ava? What will she think seeing her father destroyed? Did you think of her?" I stood up, both hands on the desk, eyes locked on his, my voice sharp as a blade. "The man who abandoned her that night for his mistress. You don't get to invoke her name to make me hesitate county jail or federal court. That's your choice. I just sign off on the outcome." I opened the drawer, pulled out the Mont Blanc pen I once gave him, and slid it across the desk. The pen stopped right at the edge of the divorce papers, the period at the end of a regime. He looked at it like it was a blade against his throat. And then he signed. The signature that once blazed with confidence now shook, slanted, like even his own hand had stopped believing in him. He signed away the marriage, the company, the illusion of being an untouchable king. He dropped the pen like it burned his skin, looked up, hollow-eyed. "You took everything from me. Are you happy now?" I gathered the papers, voice solid as stone. "I only took back what was mine. Happiness was never my goal. Freedom is. And my daughter is safe now. You should leave." New security will be here in an hour to change the locks. He stumbled out like a man who had just lost himself. And when the heavy door closed behind him, I didn't smile, didn't shake, didn't cry. I just exhaled, a long, deep breath, as if I hadn't truly breathed in 10 years. After the heavy door closed behind Ethan, the house sank into a strange kind of quiet. Not loneliness, but the stillness of a mission just completed. I stood still for a few seconds, listening to the wind brush against the glass, and realized my chest was rising and falling in a long, deep breath. The first breath that felt entirely my own. This new weight. CEO, controlling shareholder, the one who decides the fate of an entire system, didn't land on my shoulders like a boulder, but like a cloak finely worn by the right person. Heavy but tailored, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I walked slowly to the window, placed my hand on the wooden frame, looked out at the city glowing under the night sky. The buildings lit up, the trails of car lights flowing like veins that never sleep. And I heard one clear thought in my head. Let's begin. I picked up the phone and dialed Noah. When he answered, his voice still rough from an all-nighter reviewing files, I said just 4 words. It's done. A beat of silence, then the sound of him exhaling like he'd finally set down a block of concrete. 7 a.m., I added. We've got work to do. The next morning, as I stepped onto the stage at our first all-hands meeting, I could feel hundreds of eyes sizing me up, as if they weren't sure which role to put me in. The CEO's wife, the woman on the sidelines, or someone who'd accidentally landed in the wrong seat. The white lights shone down, casting a clean silence over the wide room. Broken only by the steady hum of the air conditioning, I placed both hands on the podium, calmly looking at the front rows, where those who had once approved every project Ethan pushed were now watching to see what I would say. And I began with nothing but the truth. I'm Claire Thompson, environmental engineer, designer of the Boulder Solar Plant, the Dakota Wind Network. A few people blinked in surprise. Others looked around, trying to match the name to their memory. I continued, my voice steady and clear. Today, we will halt the entire Blue Horizon project due to leverage risk and undisclosed environmental impact. From now on, Harrington Renewables, or more accurately, the company we're about to restructure, will redirect resources to clean energy projects that serve low-income communities, the kinds of projects once dismissed as not profitable fast enough. I saw a few eyes shift, a few backs straighten, like they had just heard something they'd waited years to hear. I announced that Noah would officially serve as COO, and when he stepped up beside me, the applause that rose wasn't polite. It was the sound of people realizing they were stepping out from the shadow of an old era. When the Q&A session began, I faced the kinds of questions Ethan had never let me answer before. Leverage ratios, cash flow, environmental impact reports, 5-year renewable energy strategy. I answered each one with the knowledge I had carried for years, while being dismissed as just the CEO's wife. With every number, every analysis, every technical solution I offered, I saw the expressions in the room change, bit by bit, from doubt to attention to genuine respect. And in that moment, as their eyes returned to me, I knew. I was no longer a shadow. I was leading a team that had just broken free from its chains, and I could hear my own footsteps echo, strong, steady, and entirely my own. In the first few weeks after I took over, what struck me the most wasn't the balance sheets or the mountains of email threads. It was how the air inside the building began to shift, little by little. The Harrington Renewables sign in the main lobby was taken down, each cold metal letter removed from the stone wall, making space for the new name, Bennett Clean Power. Lighter, brighter. Like the kind of future I wanted everyone to be looking toward. The CEO's office door, which had been shut tight for years under Ethan's reign, was now left wide open by me. And that simple act was enough to change the entire flow of energy in the workplace. Employees walked back and forth with laptops, leaning into each other's spaces to ask questions. The break room no longer a place to hide from management, but a hub of heated debates about new energy models. The flattery, the caution, the quiet control that used to hang heavy in these hallways vanished like smoke. In its place was something you could feel, clearly. We're building something that actually matters. One late evening, with just desk lamps casting soft light on two stacks of documents, Noah and I were still combing through community projects for suburban Detroit. He leaned back in his chair, voice soft but firm. "People are talking to each other again, Claire. No one's afraid anymore. You didn't just take back the company, you liberated it." I looked at him, then at the new blueprints spread across the table. Wind turbines, energy farms, solar grids for remote schools. And for the first time, my smile wasn't the kind you wear after a battle won. It was warm, the kind you give to something tender, taking root in the rubble 6 months later. My office no longer bore any trace of the old era. No more dark wood, no gold-plated trophies, no glossy wall photos flaunting ties to high society. In their place, light-toned furnishings, clear glass, sleek steel, framed models of energy farms next to turbine designs made for rocky mountain regions. The afternoon light streamed through the wide glass panels, casting orange hues over everything like a quiet promise of what's ahead. On the soft carpet in the center of the room, Ava, not the ICU-bound child once covered in tubes, was toddling along, her tiny hands stacking wooden blocks into the shape of a house with a slanted roof. I knelt down, picked her up, feeling her small warmth rest against my chest, then turned toward the window. The city was bathed in a blazing sunset, solar panels across rooftops catching the light like shards of mirror. I tilted my head, whispered into her soft hair, "It's not just light, sweetheart. It's the future." And in that moment, in the middle of a new office, surrounded by unfinished plans, and a child once nearly abandoned, I knew I had led them both, the company and my daughter, out of the dark. Looking back at it all, I understand now that a single sentence, "It's just a virus," spoken from a lavish party, where champagne sparkled brighter than a father's sense of responsibility, was the broken pin that collapsed an entire empire I had once bent my back to hold up. And it was also the catalyst that pushed me to rise and rebuild a whole new empire, one crafted with my own hands, my own mind, and my own resilience. This was never a story of revenge. It was a reclamation, reclaiming my name, my career, my voice, and the right to shape my daughter's future. I used the very foundation I had once quietly built for someone else to redraw the blueprint of freedom for myself. Just this once, for me and for Ava, not for any man ever again. 1 year later, I stood on the red dust plains of Montana, where the wind carried the scent of wild grass and sunlight bounced off solar panels until they shimmered like a golden lake. I wasn't wearing a ball gown, no heels, no heavy jewelry. Like those days, I was forced to play the role of the CEO's wife. I wore jeans, a rolled-up shirt, dusty boots, standing among a community, listening as Noah passionately explained the new solar power system to the locals. Ava was darting around with the other kids, her hair flying every time she laughed. Clear, ringing laughter. And then, in a quiet moment, when I looked up, I saw a figure leaning against the barbed wire fence. Ethan, thinner, more sunburned, in work clothes, quietly watching the ceremony like someone peering in from the outside of a life that no longer belonged to him. I'd been told that after burning through everything, after wandering, he'd return to his uncle's farm to start over. And today, he didn't come to cause trouble. He came just to witness. Our eyes met across a distance just far enough not to hurt. There was only a nod. No hatred, no triumph. No unfinished business. He turned away, disappeared into the wind and the dirt road, and I turned my back on that figure, walking toward the community waiting for me, toward the projects gleaming with sunlight. And I smiled, because my true victory was never about how hard he fell. It was about the fact that I kept going. My story doesn't end with a slammed door, but with sunlight pouring through a window, with the sound of my daughter's laughter. And if you're still listening at this very last moment, I want you to remember one thing. Sometimes the most beautiful empires aren't built with power, but with the ashes of old lives that no longer fit who we are. If my story reached you, if you believe in second chances, in resilience, and in the rebirth of a person, please like, subscribe, and stay with this channel, because I have many more journeys of strength, survival, and justice I want to share with you.